Saying that thank you for doing book clubs with us at Vanderbilt Library in the author's room.
Of course.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you came to Vanderbilt and where you are in your process as an undergraduate before we get started?
Yeah. So Vanderbilt was great in many aspects. I definitely love the campus, love the culture when I came to visit. It was definitely like a very good fit for me personally. And they also offered me like a lot of good financial aid too, which was a big decision. So opportunity at Vanderbilt was a huge reason why I decided to come to this school too. So that's kind of a little bit about how I got here, and I am currently just finished my sophomore year, so I guess I'm a rising junior now, majoring in political science and economics with minors in psychology and history.
Laura Miller writes that the first person we fall in love with shapes us every bit as much as the first book we fall in love with. And those emotional attachments also affect choices we make as an adult. Can you tell us, Eric, what was the first book you ever fell in love with?
Yeah, so the first book I fell in love with wasn't actually like a book specifically. It was a series of comics called Calvin and Hobbes. So as a kid, I loved these comic books. I read them all the time. I think I had like every single one almost. I had them in these different editions. So I read them all the time and just was absolutely crazy about them all.
What made them special to you?
So I really loved the relationship between Calvin and Hobbes. I thought it was contradictory yet very endearing. For example, Calvin was always trying to drench Hobbes with a water balloon, and Hobbes was always trying to tackle Calvin to get back at him. But they still loved each other very much. They went on walks all the time. They made up these made-up games that they played in the summer. So I just found that relationship and that dynamic pretty captivating, pretty interesting.
Have you reread Calvin and Hobbes, and how do you feel about it rereading it?
Yeah, so I read them a lot as a kid, reread them all the time. More recently, I have reread them also. And I've definitely realized that it's not just a comic geared toward kids, it's definitely geared toward a lot of adults too. My grandpa actually has a few of the books, and he likes reading them. And going back, I've actually discovered that Bill Watterson, who's the author, he uses a lot of very grandiloquent words, big words, and definitely speaks to adults also. Sometimes Calvin and Hobbes would get in these philosophical debates or discussions, which I thought was crazy. I probably didn't understand them as a kid, but now going back I do. And artwork, again, just realizing that was really, really amazing stuff too. So just all around a great comic, and definitely atypical for what a comic is. I think a lot of people, when they think of comics, they think of like the funnies and like a newspaper on the back. But Calvin and Hobbes is like, it doesn't try to just crack a joke or get at the punchline. It's definitely a lot more than that.
Thinking a little bit later in your life, is there a book that captured your imagination in middle school or high school?
Yeah. So in middle school and high school, the books that really captured my imagination were definitely the Eragon books and the Harry Potter books, because these like fantasy adventure novels, they really kind of captivated me. They kind of drew me in to like this new world in ways that movies really couldn't do. I loved kind of like meeting the characters, seeing them develop over the books, and I just thought it was very interesting to see like these different worlds with all these different rules kind of playing out.
Is there a book that set you on the path toward your current major or toward where you think you might want to go after graduation?
Yeah, so I can't think of any book that like influenced me on my professional path, but there definitely has been a book that's influenced me, I guess, personally. So that would be East of Eden by John Steinbeck. So that's like my all-time favorite book. And the big motif, the big theme in the book it centers around the Old Testament translation of Genesis, a verse from Genesis in the Bible, that basically God speaks to Cain in the story and says, like, thou shalt rule over sin, or thou shalt rule over it. And the characters in the book have a big issue with that translation of shalt, because it's basically a command, it's declaratory. It's implying destiny, a predetermined path. And one of the characters, Lee, really digs into that word in Hebrew and discovers that a better translation of the word timshel is thou mayest. And so that implies a sense of responsibility, a sense of personal responsibility, and definitely implies that you don't have a predetermined path, and when life throws things at you, when you feel beholden by circumstances, thou mayest, you may overcome, you may do it if you have the will to do it. So,
is there a book that you like to share with your friends and family?
Yeah, so I really love sharing pretty much any Steinbeck book, like East of Eden. I've probably read like over 15 of them. I just think he has a really unique writing style. Not everyone thinks so. I've given a couple to my sister. She thinks they're a little bit boring at times, but I think that he is a phenomenal writer, and his writing style is very different too. Most books kind of go for the rise in action, climax, fine action, but I feel like Steinbeck kind of gradually increases and focuses a lot more on character development and setting, and really portrays a great picture of what life is like very candidly, without kind of getting caught up in like a lot of plot points. So I definitely appreciate that sort of portrait that he paints in all of his books.
And is there a gift book that you remember fondly?
Yeah, so my sister, I think it was around my 16th birthday, is when my sister gave me this book. It was a hardcover edition of The Catcher in the Rye. At the time, it could still be your favorite book, but it was her favorite book then. And in the front cover, she basically wrote down like, "Happy birthday, bro. I hope you love this book. It's one of my favorites. When you finish reading it, we should talk about it because I really want to get your insight into a couple parts of it." So I read the book, we talked about it, and since then we've kind of gone back and forth, giving each other different books, giving each other recommendations, and has kind of fostered this interesting tradition between us where when we find like a great book, we want to share something, we end up just giving a recommendation and talking about it afterwards. So I definitely encourage gift books as a present because it can lead to great things.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing your book loves.
Yeah, thank you for having me.